People talk about these moments like they just happen out of nowhere. Like 1 second everything's fine, and the next you're standing in front of the truth, your whole world in pieces. But the cracks were there, man. They'd been forming for months, maybe even years, and I was just too busy, too tired, or too stupid to see them. Diana and I had been married for 10 years, long enough to fall into routines. I thought that was just normal, you know? Life isn't some rom-com. We had 2 kids, Thomas, 8, and Sophie, 5, and every day was about getting through the next. School pickups, work emails, dinners where no one really talked anymore. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Things get tough when you've been together this long. But then I saw the text message. It wasn't like I was snooping, okay? I swear I wasn't one of those paranoid husbands, lurking around trying to catch her in some lie. I didn't want to be that guy. It just happened. Her phone was right there on the counter, buzzing like crazy while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't even look, but it kept vibrating, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, and there was a message from someone named Reed Barlow. "Can't wait to see you. Same time on Wednesday." My stomach dropped. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the damn phone. I stared at the message, tried to process it. Same time? Wednesday? What the hell did that mean? I thought about opening the conversation, scrolling up to see what else was there, but I couldn't. I don't know why. I guess I was scared of what I'd find. So, I just put the phone back exactly how I found it and walked away like nothing had happened. But everything was different after that. I started paying more attention to Diana's behavior. You know how, when something's off, you start replaying old memories with new clarity? Things that didn't seem important at the time suddenly click. Like, I remembered how she started working late more often. At first, it was just the occasional night here and there, but recently it felt like every other day. "Sorry, babe, we got a deadline," she'd say with that sweet smile, kissing my cheek as if that made it better. Then there were the weekends. I used to try and plan things, picnics at the park, movie nights with the kids. But she always had an excuse. "I'm exhausted. Can we just have a quiet day at home?" She was always pulling away, always somewhere else. And when I tried to talk about it, when I tried to talk about anything, she'd brush me off like I was some annoying coworker. Sex? Forget it. I can't even remember the last time we were intimate. And when I brought it up, she'd sigh and say, "I'm just so tired, Garrett. It's not about you." But it felt like it was about me. It felt like I was some kind of burden she had to carry. The thing is, I still loved her. That's the part that messes with me. I knew something was wrong, but I wanted to believe we could fix it. I wanted to believe this was just a phase. I couldn't keep this shit bottled up, so I called Austin, my closest friend. He's been through the ringer with his ex-wife, so if anyone could give me advice, it was him. We met for beers at this dive bar downtown. I was sitting there swirling my drink around, trying to figure out how to say it. Finally, I just blurted it out. "I think Diana's cheating on me." Austin put his beer down slowly. "What makes you say that?" I told him about the text, about how cold she'd been lately, about all the weird little things piling up. He listened, nodding, his expression unreadable. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Look, man, I get it. I've been where you are, thinking the worst, letting it eat me alive. But you don't have proof yet. Don't go nuclear unless you know for sure." "So what?" "I just sit around and wait for more texts." "No," Austin shook his head. "You follow her. Quietly. You've got to know what you're dealing with before you confront her. Otherwise, she'll just gaslight you. Trust me." That conversation haunted me for days. I felt like I was losing my mind, constantly second-guessing everything she said, every little thing she did. The worst part was pretending everything was normal. Smiling, making small talk, acting like I wasn't dying inside. Wednesday finally rolled around, the day from the text. I told Diana I had a work meeting that would run late. She barely looked up from her phone. "Okay, have fun." Just like that. No questions, no curiosity. That night, I followed her. I stayed far enough behind that she wouldn't notice, driving with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I watched as she pulled into the parking lot of a hotel, some cheap place on the outskirts of town. My stomach turned. I parked a few spaces away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. And then I saw him. This tall, smug-looking asshole stepped out of his car and walked right up to Diana's. She smiled at him. Smiled in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. My chest felt like it was caving in. They kissed, right there in the parking lot, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat there, frozen, watching as she climbed into his car. They drove off toward the hotel entrance, laughing like a couple of teenagers sneaking around behind their parents' backs. That was it. That was the moment everything shattered. I knew, deep down, that this was real. I knew I wasn't crazy, and I knew my marriage was hanging by a thread. But knowing the truth didn't make it easier. It just broke me. I stayed in that parking lot for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Because once you know, you can't unknow. When I woke up the next morning, it felt like I hadn't slept at all. My head was pounding, and the weight in my chest hadn't gone anywhere. The house was quiet, just the soft hum of the coffee machine in the kitchen. Diana was at the counter, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Like last night hadn't happened. I sat across from her, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't even want. For a few minutes, I just watched her. She looked normal. No guilt, no shame, no sign that she had snuck off to some cheap hotel with Reed the night before. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her phone across the room and demand answers. But I knew if I did that, she'd just shut down. Diana could be like that. Cold, distant, impossible to get through to when she didn't want to talk. So, instead, I tried to play it cool. "Hey," I said softly, pretending like everything was fine. "How are you feeling?" She didn't even look up. "Fine." "Why?" I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack. "You've seemed distant lately. I just wanted to check in. Make sure you're okay." For a second, I thought I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe? Regret? But it was gone just as fast as it came. "I'm fine, Garrett," she said, her voice flat. "Just tired. Work's been crazy." "Work?" I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Maybe both. I nodded, playing along. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me, you know. I'm here." She finally looked at me, and for a second I thought she might say something real, something honest. But instead, she just smiled, that fake, polite smile that I'd grown to hate. "I'm fine," she repeated, getting up from the table. "I have to get ready. The kids need breakfast." And just like that, the conversation was over. A few days passed, and I tried to hold it together. I kept waiting for the right moment to confront her, but there was never a right moment. There was always a soccer practice, or a PTA meeting, or some chore that needed doing. Life didn't pause, even when you felt like your world was falling apart. But I couldn't keep pretending. It was eating me alive, the lies, the fake smiles, the constant wondering what excuse she'd use to sneak off again. So, one night after the kids were asleep, I couldn't hold it in anymore. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through Netflix like nothing was wrong. I sat down next to her, my heart pounding out of my chest. "I know," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She looked up, frowning. "What?" "I know about you and Reed," I said, my throat tightening around the words. "I know you've been meeting him. I know about the hotel." Her face didn't change. No shock, no tears, nothing. Just this cold, detached expression that made my skin crawl. "So what?" she said. Just like that. Like it was nothing. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around the fact that she wasn't even going to deny it. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shrugged. "A few months." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "Why, Diana? Why the hell would you do this to us?" She looked at me then, and there was no remorse in her eyes. Just frustration. Like I was the problem. "Because I felt invisible," she said flatly. "You stopped seeing me, Garrett. You stopped trying. I needed something, and Reed gave it to me." I sat there, stunned. "I didn't stop trying," I whispered. "I've been here every day trying to make this work." She rolled her eyes. "Being here isn't the same as being present, Garrett. You haven't really looked at me in years." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So your solution was to screw someone else?" I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. "You don't get it," she shot back. "I felt alone in this marriage for a long time. I just stopped caring." "That's bullshit, Diana," I shouted, finally losing it. "You gave up on us instead of trying to fix things. How the hell is that fair?" "Fair?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you think it's fair living with someone who makes you feel like a roommate instead of a wife?" Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I knew there was some truth in what she said. I hadn't been perfect, but I hadn't cheated either. "Do you even love me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, and that was all the answer I needed. The argument spiraled from there. We both unloaded years of resentment, saying things we couldn't take back. I accused her of being selfish, of throwing away our family for some fling. She called me emotionally unavailable, said she had no idea who I was anymore. Somewhere in the middle of it, I found myself begging, actually begging, for us to try and fix things. "I want to save this, Diana," I told her. "For the kids. For us. We can get through this if we try." But she just sat there, shaking her head. "I don't know if I want to, Garrett," she admitted, her voice cold and final. "I don't even know if I love you anymore." Those words hit harder than anything else she'd said. I felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. "Jesus Christ, Diana," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "How the hell did we get here?" She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at the floor like she was waiting for me to leave. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was more invested in saving our marriage than she was. I was willing to fight for us, but she didn't even know if she wanted to try. The silence between us was deafening. We agreed to take some time and see if the marriage was salvageable. But honestly, I don't even know what that was supposed to mean. It was like we'd hit pause on everything, except life doesn't actually stop for you to figure things out. There were still lunches to pack, work deadlines to meet, and soccer practices to drive to. On the surface, we looked like the same old family, going through the motions. But every moment we spent together was charged with tension, like a rubber band stretched too tight, waiting to snap. Diana pretended nothing had happened, like her affair was some bad dream we were supposed to forget about. She'd ask if I wanted takeout or suggest a movie night with the kids, smiling like things were normal. But every time she smiled at me, it felt fake, like she was performing for the role of good wife, without actually believing in it. I tried to play along, for the kids if nothing else. Thomas and Sophie were too young to understand what was really going on, but kids are perceptive. They knew something was off, and it started showing. Thomas became clingier, always asking if I was going to be home for dinner. Sophie threw tantrums over the smallest things, like not getting the pink bowl at breakfast or missing a bedtime story. It killed me, seeing them like that. And every time Diana and I crossed paths in the house, it was like a passive-aggressive game of chicken. We'd ask each other questions, but only the most basic, necessary ones. "What time is Thomas's practice? Did you sign Sophie's permission slip?" Polite, but with that underlying coldness that made every conversation feel like a chore. The elephant in the room, the betrayal, the anger, the resentment, loomed over us every second, but neither of us knew how to address it without exploding. I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. How did we get here? Was this always how it was, and I just didn't see it? Or had something changed along the way, so gradually that neither of us noticed until it was too late? One night, after another miserable dinner where the only sound was forks scraping against plates, I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I was drowning, and I needed help. So, I made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Ellis. I didn't tell Diana. It didn't feel like she'd care anyway. Dr. Ellis was an older guy, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I wasn't sure what I expected, some miracle advice to fix my marriage, maybe, but what I got instead was a hard truth. "You're angry," Ellis said after I unloaded everything about Diana's affair. "And that's okay. You've been betrayed by the person you trusted most. But trying to shove that anger down and pretend everything's fine, that'll only eat you alive." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, slumping back in the chair. "I want to fix things, but I don't even know if she does. It's like she doesn't care." Ellis nodded, scribbling something in his notebook. "Here's the thing, Garrett. You can't make someone care. And you can't make a decision like divorce out of guilt or anger. You have to give yourself permission to feel everything, the hurt, the rage, the confusion, without rushing to a solution. Take your time. This is a process, not a quick fix." His words made sense, but they didn't make it easier. I still felt lost, like I was stuck in this emotional purgatory with no way out. But at least I had somewhere to vent, and that was better than bottling it all up. Back at home, things didn't get better. Every time Diana and I tried to talk, really talk, it ended in disaster. She'd start with that same detached tone, like she was narrating someone else's life. I know I hurt you, Garrett, but I can't go back and change it. I'm not asking you to change the past, I'd say, trying to stay calm. I just want to know if you even want to fix this. Do you want us to work? And then she'd sigh, like I was exhausting her. I don't know. I don't have all the answers right now. Her indifference was worse than the affair. At least the cheating made me feel something. Anger, betrayal, pain. But this numb, apathetic version of Diana, it made me feel like I didn't matter at all. Like our whole life together, the 10 years, the memories, the kids, was just disposable to her. One night, we tried to have an honest conversation after the kids went to bed. I poured us each a glass of wine, hoping it might help loosen things up. For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. We talked about little things, work, the kids, even laughed about some silly things Sophie said at school. And for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But then the conversation shifted, and I asked her, again, if she was willing to fight for our marriage. I'm trying, she said, but her voice didn't match the words. No, you're not. I shot back, the frustration bubbling up inside me. You say you're trying, but you don't act like it. You act like you don't even care if we stay together. Maybe I don't, she said quietly, staring in her wine glass. That was the moment I knew we were screwed. I could forgive the affair, painful as it was, but I couldn't forgive the indifference. I couldn't forgive her not caring whether we made it or not. We went to bed that night without saying another word. Lying next to her in the dark, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to feel some kind of connection. But the space between us felt like an ocean, and I knew that no matter how far I reached, she wasn't going to meet me halfway. That was the hardest part, not the betrayal, not the lies, but realizing that the person I'd built my life with, the mother of my children, didn't care enough to fight for us. Something shifted in me after that night. Lying in bed next to Diana, feeling the cold distance between us, I knew I couldn't keep begging for her love. I'd done everything I could to fix things, but she'd made it clear she didn't care. I wasn't going to let her keep dragging me down. If this marriage was going to end, I'd make damn sure I came out on top. But I wasn't going to rage or scream. No, that would be too easy. I'd play the long game. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If Diana thought she could break me, she was dead wrong. I'd be the perfect husband, the kind she couldn't complain about, the kind she didn't deserve. I'd take care of the kids, bring her flowers, and organize family nights like some goddamn Disney dad. And all the while, I'd keep smiling, acting like nothing was wrong. Let her wonder what I was thinking. Let her squirm. It started small. I made breakfast for the kids before Diana could get out of bed. Pancakes, eggs, the works. Sophie and Thomas loved it, and I made sure they told their mom how great it was when she finally stumbled into the kitchen. Daddy made pancakes. Sophie chirped, her little face lighting up with excitement. Diana gave me a cautious smile. That's nice, Garrett. Just trying to help out, I said, flashing her the most innocent smile I could muster. That evening, I brought home a bouquet of her favorite flowers, lilies. She looked confused when I handed them to her, like she couldn't decide if it was a peace offering or a trap. What's this for? She asked, her brow furrowed. Just because, I said casually, brushing past her. Thought it might brighten your day. She didn't know what to make of it, and that was exactly what I wanted. Over the next few weeks, I doubled down on my efforts. I played with the kids more, planned game nights, even suggested we go out as a family on weekends. Diana started to act uneasy. I could see it in the way she watched me, like she was trying to figure out what had changed. She knew something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And that was the beauty of it. She couldn't accuse me of anything, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not yet. Then came the perfect opportunity, a social gathering at a friend's house. One of those laid-back affairs with too much wine and too many inside jokes. Diana's close friend, Cassidy Mason, was there. I'd always thought Cassidy was attractive, blonde, sharp-witted, and just the right amount of flirty. I wasn't planning anything serious with her, but I knew exactly how to use her to get under Diana's skin. The moment Diana walked away to grab another drink, I made my move. I slid into the seat next to Cassidy and flashed her a grin. "You're looking great tonight, Cass. That dress is dangerous." She laughed, touching my arm lightly. "Dangerous, huh? I'll take that as a compliment." We bantered back and forth, nothing too overt, but enough to make it clear I was enjoying her company. Every now and then, I glanced toward Diana, watching as her smile grew tighter and her eyes narrowed. She noticed, all right? When Diana finally came back to our side of the room, Cassidy leaned in a little closer to me, laughing at something I said. Diana's jaw clenched, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker across her face, jealousy. It was subtle, but it was there, and it felt good. On the way home, Diana was unusually quiet. I could feel the tension radiating off her, but I kept my expression calm, even cheerful. "That was a fun night," I said casually, as if nothing had happened. She glanced at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You were really friendly with Cassidy." I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "Just making conversation. She's a friend, right?" Diana didn't respond, but the way her grip tightened on the steering wheel told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few weeks, I kept up the act. I stayed attentive, always one step ahead, always playing the perfect husband. But every now and then, I dropped little hints to keep Diana on edge. A compliment to another woman in front of her, a friendly text from Cassidy that I didn't bother to hide. Nothing blatant, just enough to make her question herself. The pressure started to get to her. I could see it in the way she checked her phone less and less, her texts to read becoming fewer and further between. She stopped going out as often, making excuses to stay home instead. One night, she even suggested we have a date night, just the two of us. I agreed, of course. I played along, letting her think she was pulling me back in. But I wasn't interested in saving our marriage. Not anymore. Eventually, Diana ended things with Reed. I didn't have to ask. She told me herself, almost like she was trying to prove something. "I've been thinking," she said one evening, her voice hesitant. "I told Reed we can't see each other anymore." I raised an eyebrow, feigning mild surprise. "Oh, what brought that on?" She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "It just wasn't right. I want to focus on us, on the family." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's good, Diana. I'm glad." But inside, I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just a cold, empty sense of victory. She was trying to fix things, but it was too late. I'd already made up my mind. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. This was about watching her squirm, watching her doubt herself the way she had made me doubt everything. Diana thought she could hurt me and walk away without consequences. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Diana's announcement that she had ended things with Reed didn't hit me the way she probably thought it would. There was no surge of relief, no sense of redemption or hope for the future. If anything, it felt like too little, too late. But she didn't know that. She thought she still had a chance to salvage us, to piece together the mess she had made. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, she sat down next to me on the couch, her expression softer than it had been in months. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, her voice cautious. "I know I hurt you, Garrett, and I'm sorry. I want to make things right. I want us to try again." For a moment, I just stared at her, my heart beating slowly, steadily, as if it already knew what I was about to do. She had no idea what was coming, no idea that I'd been biding my time, waiting for this exact moment. I leaned back, letting out a breath like I was considering her words carefully. "It's good you've been thinking, Diana," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Because I've been thinking too." She smiled a little, hopeful. Yeah, I said, standing up and walking toward the kitchen counter where I'd left the paperwork. "I've been thinking that it's time we get divorced." The color drained from her face. "What?" I dropped the folder onto the coffee table between us, the word divorce printed neatly across the top. "I already filed," I told her, my tone flat. "Papers are ready to sign." She stared at the folder, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. You filed?" she whispered. "Why? I thought we were going to work on things." "No, you thought that?" I said coldly. I thought about it for a long time, and I decided I'm done. I deserve better than this. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what was happening. Garrett, please. We can fix this. We can't. I cut her off, my voice sharper now. You killed this marriage the moment you decided to cheat. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending we can go back to the way things were. For the first time in a long while, I saw a real emotion on her face. Panic, desperation, maybe even regret. But it was too late for that. I didn't think you'd actually, she trailed off, shaking her head like she couldn't wrap her mind around it. That's the problem, Diana. You thought you had all the control. You thought I'd just roll over and take it. But not this time. She sat there in stunned silence as I turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the papers. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers and awkward conversations about custody arrangements. I made sure I came across as the perfect father and husband during every interaction. I wanted the lawyers, the judge, and anyone else involved to see that I was the reasonable one, the one looking out for the best interests of the kids. I want joint custody, I told my lawyer. No alimony unless it's necessary. I just want what's fair. Diana, on the other hand, was a wreck. She came to every meeting looking exhausted, her eyes puffy from crying, her confidence shattered. She didn't argue much, probably thought agreeing to my terms would somehow make up for what she'd done. Maybe she thought it would ease her guilt if she didn't fight me on anything. But guilt doesn't change the facts. Guilt doesn't bring back trust. When it came time to divide the assets, I made sure everything was split fairly, but I didn't leave room for negotiation. I wasn't out to ruin her. I just wanted to walk away with my dignity intact. I don't want to fight, she said quietly during one of the meetings, her voice shaky. I just want this to be over. Me too, I replied without looking at her. When the papers were finally signed, Diana sat across from me, her hands trembling as she scrawled her name on the dotted line. There was a strange, hollow silence in the room when it was done, like the air had been sucked out, leaving nothing behind. Afterward, as we walked out of the lawyer's office, she stopped me at the door. Garrett, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I really am. I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman I used to love, but as someone else entirely, a stranger. Yeah, I said quietly. Me too. She gave me a small, sad smile, but I didn't return it. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone with the weight of everything she'd lost. The reality of it hit her hard in the following weeks. I could see it in the way she carried herself, defeated, unsure, lost. She tried to mask it for the kids, putting on a brave face during drop-offs and pickups, but it was clear she was struggling. The life she'd taken for granted was gone, and there was no getting it back. I, on the other hand, felt lighter than I had in years. The anger, the bitterness, the resentment, they were still there, sure, but they didn't control me anymore. I was free in every sense of the word. Diana had thought she could have it all. Her affair, her family, her comfortable life, but she was wrong. Actions have consequences, and now she had to live with hers. The day the divorce became official, I felt like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. There was no grand moment of celebration, just a quiet realization that I was free. For the first time in a long time, my life was entirely my own. The kids were my priority, no question. I threw myself into being the best dad I could be. I signed Thomas up for a travel soccer league, even volunteered to coach a few games. Sophie loved dance, so I made sure I never missed a recital, even if it meant rearranging my schedule. Every time I dropped them off at school or showed up at a game, I felt more connected to them than I had in years. I made sure they never saw the bitterness between Diana and me, even when things were tense. I kept everything smooth and cordial in front of them, never missed a drop-off, never argued over who had them for holidays. If Diana was expecting me to slip up, she was going to be disappointed. I also started taking better care of myself. I hit the gym regularly, got back into shape, and even updated my wardrobe. It felt good, better than I thought it would. I made new friends, started going out more, and reconnected with people I hadn't talked to in years. On social media, I posted pictures of the kids, snapshots from trips, and the occasional photo of a beer on a rooftop bar. The comments poured in old friends, acquaintances, even a few women from my past. "Looking good, Garrett," one message read. "Divorce looks good on you," teased another. I wasn't flaunting my new life, but I wasn't hiding it either. And I knew Diana saw it all. Her profile, on the other hand, was a ghost town. She rarely posted anymore, and when she did, it was always something vague, pictures of the kids or inspirational quotes about new beginnings. It was clear that she was struggling to find her footing. I saw it every time she came to pick up the kids. She'd pull up in the same old car, her smile forced and her eyes tired. I could tell she was trying to put on a brave face, but it wasn't fooling anyone, least of all me. I knew her too well. I knew that behind that smile was regret. Regret for what she'd lost, for the family she'd destroyed, and for the fact that she could never undo what she'd done. Every time I watched her drive away, a strange sense of satisfaction settled over me. It wasn't joy. Nothing about this situation was joyful, but it was closure. She had gambled everything, thinking she could have it all, and now she had nothing. The final nail in the coffin came a few months later at a mutual friend's party. I wasn't even planning to go, but something in me wanted to show up to remind people, and maybe Diana, that I was doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. Cassidy was there, looking radiant as always. We hadn't seen much of each other since the divorce, but she greeted me with a warm smile and a playful hug. "Look at you," she said, giving me a once-over. "Single life suits you, Garrett." I laughed, grabbing a drink from the bar. "I could say the same about you, Cass. You look amazing." We fell into easy conversation the way we always did. I could feel the energy between us, a playful, unspoken chemistry that hadn't been there before, or maybe I just hadn't noticed it. At one point, Cassidy leaned in close, her hand resting lightly on my arm as she laughed at something I said. It was innocent enough, but the kind of innocent that looks like something else if you're on the outside looking in. And that's when I saw her, Diana, standing across the room, frozen in place. Her eyes locked on me and Cassidy, her expression a complicated mix of jealousy, regret, and sadness. For a moment, our eyes met, and I could see it all written on her face. She knew. She knew she had lost me for good, that whatever hope she might have held onto was gone. I wasn't hers anymore, and I never would be again. I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, then turned back to Cassidy with a smile. "Come on," I said, taking her hand lightly. "Let's go grab another drink." As Cassidy laughed and followed me toward the bar, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what Diana was feeling in that moment, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hesitate. For the first time in a long time, I was in control. My life, my choices, my future. They were all mine now. And as I walked away from Diana, leaving her standing there in the crowd, I knew I had finally closed the chapter on us.